We are live. What's going on? This is Logan Skis. Today I'm live streaming from Boca Raton. If you're watching this video, I'm going to be breaking down a project planning workflow and I'm going to live stream the whole thing. So let's dive into it here without much delay. Just going to shrink this down here so you guys can see what I'm seeing on the main screen. So today we're going to be focusing our work in the Venture Map. The Venture Map is built inside of a visual collaboration platform called Miro. If you're not familiar with Miro, it is a whiteboard. It's just like Google Docs is a digital document or sheet or PowerPoint. This is a digital whiteboard. And together with my colleague, we have built out what is called the Venture Map. This is a place for you to visualize and integrate all of your business systems, process, collateral, etc. But we're going to be focusing our efforts today at the very beginning, which is in project planning. I posted a video yesterday about gamification in project planning. We talked a little bit about the approach to that, but today I'm going to get a little more granular and I'm going to actually show you how I would scope out a project for a new client, a new venture map, effectively, a new use case on the map, so to speak. Now, I by no means am a project management professional. I've had the benefit of learning from a number of great resources. One of the books that I do recommend, I featured this in the last YouTube video as well. It's called the Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager, which is definitely something I can relate to. If you're in a position where you're working on project and leading projects on a regular basis, I couldn't recommend that YouTube video or that Audible book, excuse me, high enough. One of the things that I took away from that book and all of my other studies, as well as real life application with clients and in my own business, is starting off with a scope statement. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. Some people talk about a project charter. We used to do a project charter. We're more leaning towards this simplified scope statement now. This is what ours looks like. And these are some of the core elements. I'm just going to run it through live with you to show you some of the details. So typically you want some basics: project name, start date, estimated duration, and who actually did it. So our project name is venturemap.io. Start date is today. We're looking at 5 weeks, and we've got a go live date. Let's see, 10/1, something like that. And let's call it and of course I finished it up. I'm working on it now. So this is a low fidelity draft that you can use to present to colleagues, teammates, stakeholders, and even present it to clients if you're in an agency or consultant position. One big thing that we want to start off with is goals, and we can get pretty low fidelity here. It doesn't need to be too fancy, so I like to put a few post-it notes on the board. We want to just illuminate some of the things that we want to accomplish here. I typically like to lead with this one: mitigate risk, validate assumptions, generate. We can get specific, right? We can also keep it pretty broad. The more specific, the better, so it can be translated into deliverables. But we want to generate 100 new leads, for example, and we want to bring in 3 highly qualified customers. Let's see, and secure. Let's see, within the next 5 weeks, secure new case study. Let's call it 2 new case studies. All right, so those would be big goals. Could have been done in 30 seconds, just like that. Let's push forward. Deliverables. This is where you start thinking, well, what is it actually going to take to produce the goals that we just discussed? Something I've got here is an evidence-based entrepreneurial strategy that mitigates risks, maximizes capital efficiency, and clearly demonstrates commercial competency to both stakeholders and customers alike. That's a lot to say at once. Let's say some base deliverables. We know that we're going to need a business plan, or at least a business model. We're going to need to clearly define our customer. Um, we're going to need to know who we're not going to serve. So we can think of an anti-customer avatar. That's very important when starting off. Uh, we're going to need to have some clearly uh, clearly defined terms on our addressable market. So let's call that market size. And let's see. Well, there's a number of things. Our go-to-market strategy. So we need to look at our marketing plan, our funnel, our core narrative, and if we're really being wise in the planning stage, we know that culture is what uh, reverberates through to the customer. So we're going to want to have a clearly defined sheet of guiding principles to keep our cultures, that clearly illuminate our culture. So let's say guiding principles. And that's really in no specific order. It would probably be a little more like this, and structured like that. Let's move forward. Out of scope. What are some things that we know we're not going to do? Um, this is some basics, right? We Something that could definitely distract us is making a podcast during the next month, delivering coaching in person. That may be relevant. It may not be. We may say, hey, we're not going to attend local networking events during this. We're not going to sell merchandise. I like to keep it pretty simple. Out of scope. There we go. And let's maybe put something else in there. We're not going to quit before it's finished. That's a little more of a motivational one, but it works. You gotta make this your own. All right, constraints. What could potentially hold us back? Limited capital resources, limited pre-existing audience, limited experience with paid advertising, unvalidated positioning, offer funnel, sales, and fulfillment. Those are constraints, certainly. This is an area that I won't go into now, I'm specifically demonstrating how a army of one, how a solopreneur or a very small team starting off a project could go through something like this in a short period of time. But if you are reporting, if you're delivering to clients, if you have managers or stakeholders, you're definitely going to want to illuminate who the stakeholder is, how you're going to communicate with them, by what method, whether it be emails, calls, weekly meetings, over Zoom, in person. If you're shooting screen recordings through Loom and you're sending those, and with project files, you're going to want to delineate the method of keeping that stakeholder in the loop for reporting, and the timeline, what that looks like. Finally, the threshold of performance is very important to delineate during this early stage, because basically we're saying, okay, what are we doing? What are the goals? What is it going to take to achieve those goals? What are we definitely not going to be doing to achieve the goals? And what could potentially hold us back from achieving those goals? Who are we going to be talking to the entire time and reporting on our progress while we're working towards the goals? And then what is the acceptance criteria? What's the threshold of performance? I like to think of this as a pole vaulter, right? You got to know how high it is that you need to jump. So what's the threshold of performance, the acceptance criteria? And then how is that going to actually be approved? Who's ultimately going to take responsibility for approving the final deliverables? So that's a real quick speed run through a scope statement. Now, um, the next logical step in the equation is to push down the chain. So if that's kind of level one, going down in terms of depth in this pillar, and this is the project planning pillar underneath the vision, that's really where you can start. We like to say that the disciplined visionary begins with project planning, because once you have a firm plan in place, then everything else starts to kind of cascade or fall like a series of dominoes. So if you've got at the bare minimum a scope statement, you can push forward. But if you really want to conduct your due diligence, you're going to do right by yourself, by your team, by your future customers and stakeholders, and get a bit more clarity. Because although a low fidelity scope statement like this that captures a high level overview is helpful, it's better than nothing. Having these as deliverables can only take you so far. Post-it notes are simple statements. So this is not a traditional uh, work breakdown structure. A work breakdown structure typically looks like multiple version of what we're looking at here, kind of like a tree or family tree. I like to break mine up a little more of an unconventional approach. We're specifically planning within the context of the venture map, which has a lot of sections. So I like to break the deliverables up by section. That can typically be helpful. So let's see, we're about 10 minutes down here. I'll go for a few more minutes on the live run. So if we just finished up our scope statement, we know the next thing that's going to have to occur is our work breakdown structure. So in order to do a work breakdown structure, it doesn't have to be very complicated. It can be very straightforward. And that to begin, you need to just get a one step forward in terms of defining what literally needs to be done. A lot of the time, as in my experience as entrepreneurs, business owners, managers, uh, teammates, they have something that needs to get done, right? They're either issued some sort of a project or they know they need to move forward and they just start executing. It's kind of a shoot first, ask questions later approach. And taking just a few moments to analyze the big chunks of what actually needs to be done is so important. So I'll just run through for just a minute what that looks like. Uh, so if we're thinking of mapping out deliverables within Vision, let's see, let's punch it out. We know we've got project planning and team culture. So we're going to have 5 and 5 for a maxed out column on both sides. Let's see, these two bottom ones are very specific, and they're kind of prestige mode. If you're a consultant or an agency delivering these services to a customer, you definitely want to include a visual appendix that defines your terms, and it again is in that acceptance criteria. So you want to ensure that you know how high you got to jump. That threshold of performance is agreed to and clarified beforehand, right? The last thing you want as a consultant is an ambiguous understanding of a successful outcome in your mind, in your team's mind, or in your customer's mind, because you are the likelihood that everyone's at a slightly different place or vastly different place is high. So when you deliver something and you're ready to get paid or you're ready to close out the project, but the customer had a totally different idea in their mind, you don't want to find yourself in that position. So, but I do have the purple sand dials here. That's indicating a mid-range or even a long-term asset for most players in the game, for most users in a venture map. You're not going to need, if you're a solopreneur on a small team, you probably won't need an appendix out of the gates, and you probably will not need a full-blown proposal for your plan. Um, it, again, it just depends on the case. So I'm not. Let's say we hold off on those two for the time being. Also, in culture, we have a venture growth story that's telling the story of the business. It's a little bit different than an origin story of the founders. So we like to say that that's really nice to have. It's very beneficial to have on hand, but it may not be very necessary out of the gates. So let's cut off those three. So if we're looking at a vision pillar alone, core deliverables that'll really be meaningful is scope statement, work breakdown structure, Gantt chart. And again, a Gantt chart can look like this, and it's basically saying we know what we have to do. Now let's define when it's going to be done by, and that's how you find your ultimately your milestones. Let's see. Then you'll move into your cultural pillar. One of the most important things to have listed is why you're doing something, what the purpose is behind it all. You can do that through a statement of a just cause, mission statement, vision statement, a number of other things, starting with why. Um, from there, it is helpful to define some super basics like who is the team around this purpose, what are their characteristics, aspirational characteristics, and skill sets. Um, how are we doing what we're talking about doing in terms of the method? Just real basic. You should be able to just put a bullet point down for the kind of activities you're going to be doing as a group to to accomplish the goals, the vision and mission, and then the kind of environmental priorities or the the surrounding culture. You could think of it like that. Like what sort of organizational culture needs to be reinforced in order to facilitate um, a space where these kind of activities can take place. These sort of characteristics and skill sets are fostered, and ultimately the core nucleus or the purpose of the company is secured and developed. And lastly, sort of the outer membrane of all of that is the solution itself. This is like a bare bones elevator pitch, the most simplistic way you can possibly define what it is you're going to try to do and how it works in very, very simple terms, caveman speak. So those are guiding principles. We find it's typically helpful to have a leaderboard. So who's who in the zoo. We like to say, individual. A picture there is helpful if you're doing a personality profile, the individuals, which is highly recommended. It's a great place to start. Um, then we like to have some self-prescribed. Let's see, we go personality, proficiency, and passions. So proficiency is what we're great at in our own words. How do we define what we are great at in our passions? Really, where our hearts are, what we love to do, and what we love in life in general. And we scope that out. So that's pretty helpful in terms of expanding deeper on the team. You can go one step further in terms of visualizing the team. We're big fans of the Enneagram personality framework. So we have the team tapestry. This allows organizations and teams of any size to see in a very clear way where people fall on a personality matrix and how to better understand themselves using very clear terms to describe their drivers, their apprehensions, the mechanisms of their personality, and understand their colleagues. So we think that's a pretty important first step. Last piece in the culture column is origin story. I think it's really important to have your story straight from the earliest days in terms of where you're coming from and how you're showing up to the work. It doesn't have to be very fancy. It doesn't have to be something that takes a lot of time, but sitting down for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours, an afternoon, and drafting an origin story, whether you're a solopreneur, a small team, or even a medium to large scale organization, an origin story is something that will bring multiplicity of benefits. So if we're looking, I'll finish here because as you can see, there's a number of deliverables we could continue scoping together. But if I just stop at the vision column and we say, what are some super basics in terms of order of operations of just stuff that needs to be done? Then we would define these key ones here, and then I'll zoom back in. And this is, of course, me putting on my unofficial project manager's hat. We could do something like this. Delete this guy. You don't have to have an MBA or a specialty training to do any of this. You can get a free Miro account. You can get a free venture map. If you've stayed this long into the video, if you watch this far, all you have to do is just click the link below. It'll have a pop-up. You just tell me where to send it, and you'll get you'll get your own venture map sent straight to your email. It'll be a blank version, so you can start fresh. And if you haven't used Miro before and you're not really familiar with a lot of this stuff I've been discussing, that's okay. It's not really taught in standard school. You got to read a lot of books and focus on many areas of knowledge to build a level of understanding. So I'm happy to help you out in terms of getting started. So after you tell me where you want to send the venture map, you'll have an option to book a free onboarding session. So you just find a time in the calendar that works for both of us, secure that spot, and we'll connect over Zoom. I'll help you get set up in your own venture map, and for free. I love connecting with members of the community that are passionate with similar things that I am, and that's my gift to you, and for taking the time out of your busy schedule to check this out. Let's see, guiding principles. All right. You say guiding principles, leaderboard, a team tapestry. This one's easy to fill out if you got a leaderboard because you had already have done the personality testing. Last but certainly not least is our origin story. Alrighty. So that's that. If you can, if you got a computer, you know how to basically move a mouse around and type things in, you can pretty much work the venture map inside of Miro. I will say, if you've got any experience whatsoever working on real-time strategy games, such as let's see, Rome Total War and the Total War franchise, if you've got any experience in that kind of stuff, you're going to be pretty far ahead of the game. Uh, Beyond that, if you have a project management background, if you're a UX, UI, or UI designer, you have any experience whatsoever in service design, you're going to be leagues, I mean, truly leagues ahead of the curve, ahead of the rest of the group. But I'll tell you what, a lot of that stuff can be learned online for free or at very low cost, and the skills come pretty fast. So if you're in that position, you're like, man, should I go to school for 4 years to see if I can learn, in this case, service design, project management? I would say maybe not, maybe not. It wasn't what definitely wasn't the path for me. Um, it's definitely the path for some other folks, but I elected to pursue the the United States Marine Corps, and that was my path in life. And I've come to find that the majority of skill sets you need in the business, you are better learning them on the fly. And that school is really good at teaching you how to be an employee. Nothing wrong with employees, of course, but for those ambitious visionaries out there who aren't willing or ready to settle, then you know, getting out. There's no better way to do it than baptism by fire, jumping into it. So what you just saw here is a step-by-step kind of workflow on how I would actually go through and start scoping out work breakdown structure or key deliverables for a project. And I like to have a place where I could bring my team or bring the client in throughout the project, whether it's you're a one man or woman show and you just need some visual indication of what's done, what's not done. It's pretty straightforward. So and it's very meaningful for clients when you have that visual indication. So that you could zoom out as a whole, start seeing what's done, what's not done, and what's long term. Ultimately, we scope out all of this, right? Because once you're done with vision, you're going to move into strategy, market analysis, business model. And you're going to you basically define your implementation method, how you're going to take it to market. Then it's market plan. You're going to define key elements of your marketing plan and your funnel wireframe, your traffic channels, your core brand narrative, your brand essence board. Like, what's your logo, what's your color palette, what typography selection are you going to be using? Um, then you're going to look at your active campaigns. Like, how are you going to be targeting through Google Ads, Facebook Ads, Instagram? What are those? You can embed your content calendar, Google Studio, all of that good stuff. And then it really turns into a totally different game, which is let's simulate the entire customer experience from the first touch point all the way to the last. Let's weave in hero's journey touch points so we can optimize the customer experience throughout the duration of the journey. We can incentivize testimonies, referrals, general advocacy, extending the customer, um, the customer lifetime value, and identifying inefficiencies, whether it be in sales, whether it be at leaks, so to speak, in the chain for our funnel, and as well as understanding how we will interface with the customers directly in front stage actions and what we got to do backstage to really ensure that things are moving along in time. So, although the entire framework is contextualized across time, it's kind of a temporal map. This is really where it goes to a new level once your planning is complete, which is who is doing what when and how can we make it even better. And that's really where that comes into play. So over time I'll continue posting video content, and I'll have a whitewashed or a template venture map to continue sharing with you guys. If this video is compelling to you at all and you're interested in getting your own venture map, again, just click the link below in the description and let me know where you want me to send a blank version of this for yourself. You can get started for free and Miro, and you got a free template from me. I'll even go one step further and help you onboard this through Zoom, so at no cost. So just go ahead and click the link below. Let me know where to send it, book a time, and that's all I got for now. So thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.